Hello, Put Me in Coaching family. I hope everyone is having a fantastic day so far. Happy Easter. If you are watching live, go ahead, just drop a hashtag live in the comments. If you're watching the replay, drop a hashtag replay. Hope you had a wonderful Easter either way. I know we had several people that were going to be catching the replay tonight. Doesn't matter when you get the information, just as long as you are getting the information. I am so excited about tonight's topic, overflowing abundance. I think this is a topic that has come at exactly the right time. And what I mean by that is sometimes it gets overlooked and we get so caught up in the results, in the goals, in the progress that we forget that the whole process is meant to be enjoyable. And this is a topic that's come up several times just in the last 24 hours, but it's also come up over the last week. And so I was already planning on doing something around this topic. And then as I was attending service this morning, it just was very, very clear. Whether you're religious or not, doesn't matter. But it was very clear that the concept of overflowing abundance sometimes can make us feel selfish, and it can make us feel like we're not giving back the way we should be. But that's not the case. Life is meant to be enjoyed. Life is meant to deliver everything that we are wanting out of life, right? The universe and the higher beings, whomever that is for you, right? It may be no one, it doesn't matter, right? Life is meant to be enjoyed. We are here to have great things and do great things. And one way we can give back is by fully stepping into that. So we're going to talk a little bit about that concept tonight. And it was really interesting. I was just watching a video on YouTube a little bit ago, and it was a lady that does personal training clients online. She does online coaching, and she was talking about how she doesn't post pictures of her client transformation. She doesn't talk a whole lot about it. She'll mention it from time to time, but she doesn't post pictures like a lot of coaches do. And there's nothing wrong with posting pictures, right? But she doesn't post pictures because she said it's more than just the physical transformation. It's more than just the attitude shift, right? It is the complete mind, body, spirit, all of that transformation where people are showing up more confident in their relationships, more confident in their careers, more confident in life in general. And that's what really the whole concept of Health Accelerator, Simple Fat Burn is all about, right? That's why I chose to get that certification because it just made sense. It was more than just the physical transformation. And that was very evident in my journey specifically, but I think in a lot of other people's journeys as well. I just shared a client testimonial on Instagram the other day about how, yeah, it was great that the client lost 80 pounds. But what was even greater was the relationship she developed with her son, even though she was worried she wasn't going to be able to develop that great relationship with him because he was a picky eater and all of those things. And so that's what these wins are truly all about, is those transformations in mindset, the increase in confidence, the ability to show up unapologetically and be so excited about what you have to offer. And not selfishly, but because you know you have some inspiration to give, you have a story to tell, you have the confidence, you have what people are looking for. You can add value. When we talk about scripting, I talk so much about the lines that I script all the time. And I have some things that change depending on what goals I'm specifically working toward at the time. But one phrase I script all the time, every day is, I add value to all relationships. And how do I do that? I have to come from a place of abundance. I have to come from a place that I understand that I deserve everything I want and more, everything that I'm working toward and more. And once you start to believe that, that's where that mindset really starts to shift. And so we talk a lot about the 7-step signature system, the opt in. And part of that opt in and part of that buy in is the understanding that it is much more than just a physical transformation, that it is an entire mental, spiritual, physical, all of that transformation. And when we can achieve that mindset and that understanding, that's when things start to open up and things start to pour in, right? There is so much room for overflowing abundance, right? Think about a glass of water. All right. And so, and I got this example in the sunrise service I was at this morning. And I really enjoyed it because he was really talking in generic terms, not religion specific, not Easter specific, but just life. And the concept that we can show up and we can pour into ourselves. We can take a glass of water and we can take a pitcher of water and start pouring into that glass. And we can just continue to pour and continue to pour until it's overflowing with abundance. And it was such a powerful illustration because he actually had a glass and he had a pitcher and he was pouring the water. And I think that those messages come at just the right time. Right. And while we're in this transition phase of really understanding, yes, I am working toward a physical transformation, but it's so much more than that. If I want that lasting result, I want that long-term success. And I have a tradition with one of my best friends, and we've done this since college. So, almost 20 years we've been doing this, and we pick a different place to go each Easter for a service just to hear the different perspectives and different messages. And, we've missed a couple years here and there, but we were actually able to go to SeaWorld this year. And it was incredible. So it was a sunrise service over the stadium where they have the orca show. And so we're sitting there listening to this, the preacher talk about abundance. And again, not in a sense of religion, but just in a sense of life in general. And he was speaking, and as he's speaking, we see the sun rising, right? Because we're outside, and it was absolutely beautiful and it was breathtaking. And it really made you stop and think and really look at the bigger picture. Right? At least for me, it did. I'm looking around and it's like, this is incredible. We have this entire world that we're able to just go out and we're able to add value. And we're able to go and we're able to accomplish everything we want and more within that. And so it was very interesting that that message came um, during that time, because that illustration of that glass of water and then just continuing to pour into it was very powerful. And it reminded me of a message that I was at a convention a couple years ago, and it was the personal and professional development segment of the conference. And the speaker walked out on stage and just started saying terrible things, saying, "You're worthless. You're stupid. I can't believe you did that. You're awful." And it's like, we're all sitting there, just watching, like, what is he doing? What is he doing? And I've talked about this in class before, and this was a long, long time ago. So I want to talk about this specific example, because when we talk about abundance, right? Abundance can be positive or negative, right? We want the overflowing, joyous abundance, right? We don't want an abundance of sadness and negativity. We want that positive abundance. So what does that look like? What that looks like is making sure we're speaking nicely to ourselves, making sure we are ingesting positivity, whether that's through social media, TV, um, the people that we're surrounding ourselves with. Have you ever been around somebody where you're just like, you can't get away from them fast enough? Because it's just like, oh my gosh, if this person says one more thing, I can't take it. Right. But the more positive you are and the more positivity you put out in the world, the less you start to encounter people like that, because they're just not, they may be living in a negative space, but when they're around you, they're not going to be able to behave like that, because we're responding from a place of abundance and a place of positivity. And so it starts to change their behavior. Remember, we can only control how we respond. We can't control what other people do. But if we don't respond negatively to somebody who shows up in a negative way, then eventually they're either just going to go away or they're going to follow suit and join in that positivity. Okay. And so this speaker, he comes out and he's saying all these negative words, and he talked about this study that was done, and I should have pulled this study up. I didn't, and that's okay. You can look it up, but it was a study with rice. They did rice, and they had this rice just sitting in a jar. And they had one where they spoke very positively to the rice every day. And then they had rice that they spoke very negatively. And literally, I mean, positive words to this one jar of rice and negative words to this other jar of rice. And this was, I can't remember if it was a Harvard study. It was one of the Ivy League schools that did this study. And they're speaking very positively to one jar, very negatively to the other jar. Well, the jar that continued to get the negativity, it turned moldy. It started to mold. And just imagine how powerful that is, how powerful our words are. You know, people talk about how you're supposed to talk to plants, right? And it can help them thrive as long as you're speaking nicely to them. But that should just show you. I mean, the studies are there, the research is there. So imagine what's happening internally if you're constantly speaking negatively to yourself. Now, does that mean you never have a negative thought cross your mind? Absolutely not. We all have that, right? That's our self-protection mode, right? When we are changing the way we think, we're changing our mindset, we really get into where we start to have those conflicting thoughts coming in because we're so used to living in one way. Remember, behavior change takes time. It's a marathon, it's not a sprint. And so we have to practice speaking positively to ourselves. That's why it's so important when we're scripting. We script as if things have already happened, but then we also script our positive affirmations, because the more we write it, the more it embeds in our subconscious and the more we start to believe it. And I think that's a powerful concept, that the more we can pour into ourselves positively, the more our metaphorical glass starts to overflow with positivity, and your health, your physical transformation, your mental transformation, your relationships, they have no choice but to follow suit. Just think about the last time you had a really positive interaction with somebody. How did that make you feel? How did you walk away from that conversation? Or maybe you made a big purchase or something you'd been saving up for, and then you finally were able to achieve that purchase, or you finally hit a goal that you've been wanting to hit. How did that make you feel? And we have to be able to recreate those feelings, right? We have to be able to recall them. And so it's important to think about. That's why we celebrate all wins. You see, this whole signature system just falls right into place. We celebrate our wins because that reminds us how it feels to win. And it allows us to continue to live in that space and in those emotions. So last week, I think I mentioned this on class last week, but I did a race last week, and I had to laugh at myself during the race because I didn't prepare for this race. It was just something that I decided 2 weeks before it was happening that I was going to join my friend in doing it because I hadn't seen my friend. This is another friend from college. I hadn't seen her in over a year and we'd been trying to get together, and I had a free day and I said, "Hey, what are you doing?" She said, "Hey, I'm going to do a sprint triathlon this day in Cocoa Beach." And I thought, well, I haven't been training, so I don't need to, I have no business going to swim. I said, but I could do the duathlon, which is a 1 mile run, a 12-mile bike, and then a 5K run. I was like, I can do that, without even training because I stay in good shape. So I was like, I can do that, no problem. So I asked her, do you mind if I join you and I'll just do the duathlon and you do the triathlon? She's like, oh, that would be great. And mind you, I'm also training for my next powerlifting competition, which is May 3rd. So 2 weeks from yesterday. Now, it's a little bit of a foreign concept for the people that don't compete in powerlifting, but you typically don't train for an endurance sport at the same time that you're training for powerlifting. It's just different training, right? And although I wasn't training for the endurance sport, I was still going to do it. And my coach was mad at me for doing this. He's like, I don't understand. I was like, you know what? I'm just going to do it. It should be no problem. So first of all, I finished, right? I finished, an emphasis on finished. I finished. And I finished in a respectable time, especially for not having trained or anything. And I took it easy because I didn't want to overexert myself. Because again, I've got my powerlifting competition in mind. So I thought I was really responsible in that. I was very proud of myself. I was celebrating that win, but I had to laugh at myself as I was leaving the transition area from the bike going to the 5K. And I look and I see all these spectators. And I just started laughing at myself. And I said, you know what? It never even occurred to me until this very second that I could have just said, hey, why don't I just come and watch you do your triathlon? Why don't I just come and support you and just watch you? It was like, no, I'm going to support her by doing it with her. And that's just how my brain was working at that time, because that's just how I've always operated. And so I've had to learn that there's other ways I can give back, right? And so nobody's perfect. I'm still learning and still learning how I can add value. And for in my head, it was, hey, let me just go do this with her. And it was great. I'm not upset that I did it. And even as I was getting off the bike, I'm like, man, I don't even have to finish this thing because I have nothing to prove to anybody. I've done triathlons before. Like, I don't have anything to prove. And then I'm telling myself, well, you signed up for it. You're going to finish it. Like, all you got left is a 5K. You're going to be fine. Just do it. And so as I'm like going through all this self-talk, right, on this race, as I've, and I finished. And was I proud of myself? Absolutely. Do I need to do it again? Probably not. Next time I'll just say, hey, you know what? How about I come watch you? I'll come cheer you on. And it was just funny because I had to really check myself and say, you know what? Like, that there was a time that was great, but right now you're more focused on your powerlifting. And so you've got to train a different way. You've got to move a different way. You've got to think a different way. Nothing wrong with it, but she's also not going to come and do a powerlifting competition with me because she's like, I've got no business doing that. And she's right. She doesn't right now because she hasn't trained for it. And so it's just funny, just the perspectives that we get. So there's different ways we can pour into people and pour into ourselves. And so pouring into myself now is realizing, hey, I don't have to do it, right? I don't have to participate. I can participate in so many other ways than just signing up for something 2 weeks before and just going and doing it, right? I don't have anything to prove. I don't have to do it. And so it was just funny. I found myself just laughing at myself saying, gosh, but am I glad I did it? Yeah. But anyway, I say that to say there were a lot of negative thoughts going through my head on that course, but that doesn't mean I was in a negative space. It was, oh my gosh, what were you thinking? This was just there. So, but then I found that positivity and being able to laugh at myself and say, Carly, you know what? Just slow down next time. And so being able to do that shows that I'm not living in criticism. I'm living in, hey, I can admit when it's time to hang it up and maybe move in a different way. Not to say, and I think that's really important, and that's a huge win. And that those are the wins that when we can recognize those and we can start stepping into that, that's when you reach that whole new level of self-confidence and self-assurance. It's like, hey, listen, I can show up for people in different ways. I don't always have to do it with them, right? I do what serves me and what is good for me. And then that's going to allow me to show up in bigger and better ways for everyone else down the road. Again, pouring into that cup until it's overflowing with positivity and confidence and radiance. And it was really cool to talk to. And I told Laura I was going to mention this week, but Laura did her 5-mile race last week, and it was incredible, right? She finished and she did so well, and I'm so proud of her. And she's continuing to check the boxes off of her 50 things by the time she's 50. And it's so cool to hear her stories and to be able to share in that joy and share in that accomplishment. And to also be able to say, Laura, I'm going to let you go run those 5-mile, 10-mile, 5K, all those races. I'm going to let you do that. And I'm going to cheer you on from the sidelines. And that's stepping into understanding and being confident in who you are and being confident in what you bring to the table and being confident in your journey. And when we get to that place where we are so confident in our journey that we are unapologetically ourselves, that's when you start to see the biggest transformation. When I was originally going through my simple fat burn journey, I remember bailing on certain things with friends because it didn't align with my goals at the time. It didn't mean I wasn't ever going to hang out with them again, but what it meant was right at that specific moment for that 8 months and 3 days, these are the things I did. And it was foregoing the big concert that I didn't really care about the artist that was performing. I was just going to go to hang out with my friends, but foregoing that to be able to get another workout in because I was close to achieving my goal. And I'm not saying that's for everybody, but that's what worked for me at that moment. And that's what gave me the confidence to continue to show up for myself and to continue to pursue my goals. When I was getting my board certification in behavior analysis, there was 3 months where I studied. I was the kid in school who never really had to study all that hard. I always made good grades all through college, high school, all of that. I didn't have to study all that hard, except in math sometimes, but that's okay. But I didn't really have to study, but I knew that this board exam was going to be incredibly difficult. It only had a 60% pass rate on the first try. Well, I didn't have an option. I had to pass it on the first try, right? I had people counting on me. And so it was really important that I did everything I could and studied the exact right way. So I gave myself every opportunity, right? I had to delay the gratification. I had to forgo hanging out with friends. So this, for 3 months, I studied 3 to 4 hours a night. I was working full time at the time. And so I studied 3 to 4 hours a night, every single night during the week after work. And then on the weekends, I studied 12 hours a day. And the only thing I did was on Friday nights, I went to dinner with one of my friends. And we still do Friday night dinners to this day. And this has been a tradition since I met her in 2009. So 15 years we've been doing this. And it's really like, I look back on that time and I didn't really feel like I missed out on much because I still had that one non-negotiable, right? I had my goals, but then I set a goal and I had to build in that delay of gratification, that delay of reinforcement to be able to achieve the goal I wanted. And I passed on the first try. And so these are things that you have to really sit back and think, if I'm going to get to that overflowing, that place of overflowing abundance, is there something specific I need to give up or forego for a short period of time, right? Maybe that's your chips and salsa. Maybe that's your sweet treats. Maybe that's, just eating off plan for a little bit. You got to give it up, but it's going to allow you to enter that stage of overflowing abundance where you are showing up in the absolute most confident version of yourself. And so that's why I say, I want you, and this is the last thing we're going to do, but I want you to really think back to the last time you achieved something that you were so proud of. And I want you to think about how that made you feel. And then I want you to think about the goal you're working toward and how you are going to feel. I want you to remember the feeling of achieving the other goal. And I want you to think about how you are going to feel once you achieve the goal you've set for yourself. And they should be similar, if not almost exactly the same. And I want you to think about what you had to give up to achieve that last thing, right? It may not be the same things you have to give up, but you remember that sacrificing a little bit allowed you to enter that place of overflowing gratitude and overflowing abundance to be able to show up of the version of yourself where you are proud, you are accomplished. And I want you to think, is there one or two things you either need to introduce and implement or give up to be able to achieve that feeling by achieving your next big goal? All right. And so that's where we're going to stop for this evening. I want you to really think, where is that place of overflowing abundance going to come for you? And how are you going to feel when you get there? All right. And we will not have class next Sunday. I will be traveling back from Baltimore. So no class next Sunday, but we'll pick back up the following Sunday, which I believe will be May 4th. So if you're a Star Wars fan, I'm not, but they say May the 4th be with you. So there we go. So I will see you all back here on May 4th. But until then, I will see you on text messages, in the chat on here. And then once we get our app up and running, I will get that out to everyone and we will go from there. So I appreciate everyone for showing up, whether it's live or catching the replay. I am overly grateful for all of you, and I'm wishing you an overflowing abundance of success this week, next week, and I will see you back on the 4th, but I'll see you in text messages and in the chat in the meantime. Have a fantastic rest of the evening, and I will see you soon. Bye.